You know what's absolutely insane? There was a guy who conquered most of the known world by the time he was 30 years old. 30. Most of us are still figuring out our careers at that age, and this man had built an empire stretching from Greece to India. He never lost a single battle, not one. And here's the kicker. He did all of this in just 13 years. Today, we're diving deep into the life of Alexander the Great, and I'm going to show you why military historians still study his tactics over 2,000 years later. Stick around, because the story you're about to hear is going to blow your mind. What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button because we explore the most fascinating figures in history. And trust me, they don't get more fascinating than Alexander the Great. Today, we're going to unpack how a young Macedonian prince became the greatest military commander the world has ever seen, the brilliant strategies that made him unstoppable, and the legacy that still influences military thinking today. Let's get into it. Picture this. It's 356 BCE in the Kingdom of Macedon, located in what's now northern Greece. A boy is born to King Philip II and Queen Olympias, and from day one, this kid was destined for something extraordinary. His mother told him he was descended from Achilles, the legendary Greek hero. His father was one of the most formidable military leaders of his time. But here's what set Alexander apart. He wasn't just born into greatness. He was trained for it in ways that would shape the future of warfare itself. When Alexander was 13, his father hired none other than Aristotle, literally one of the greatest philosophers who ever lived, to be his personal tutor. For 3 years, Alexander studied philosophy, science, medicine, and literature. He became obsessed with Homer's Iliad, carrying a copy with him everywhere he went. He slept with it under his pillow alongside a dagger. This wasn't just a book to him, it was his blueprint for glory. He saw himself as the new Achilles, and he was going to make that vision a reality. But Alexander wasn't just a bookworm. His father made sure of that. Philip trained him in the art of war from an early age. At 16, while his father was away on campaign, Alexander was left in charge of Macedon as regent. During this time, a Thracian tribe rebelled, and Alexander didn't hesitate. He crushed the rebellion, defeated the tribe, and founded a city in his own name. At 16 years old, let that sink in for a moment. 2 years later, at the Battle of Chaeronea, 18-year-old Alexander commanded the Macedonian cavalry and led the decisive charge that broke the Theban sacred band, an elite fighting force that had never been defeated before. His father's armies won that day, but it was clear to everyone watching, this young prince was something special. Then in 336 BCE, everything changed. Philip was assassinated at a wedding, and suddenly 20-year-old Alexander was king. Now, you might think the Greek city-states would have respected this transition of power, but you'd be wrong. They saw a young, inexperienced king and thought this was their chance to break free from Macedonian control. Thebes rebelled. Athens plotted. The northern tribes stirred. Alexander's response was swift and brutal. He marched his army south so fast that the Greek cities were stunned. He didn't just defeat them, he made an example that no one would forget. When Thebes rebelled again, he razed the entire city to the ground, sparing only the temples and the house of the poet Pindar. 30,000 people were sold into slavery. It was harsh, it was ruthless, but it sent a clear message: don't mess with Alexander. With Greece secured, Alexander turned his eyes to the prize his father had always dreamed of, Persia. The Persian Empire was the superpower of the ancient world. It had wealth beyond imagination, armies numbering in the hundreds of thousands, and a king, Darius III, who who sat on the throne of the greatest empire the world had ever seen. Alexander crossed into Asia in 334 BCE with about 40,000 men. The Persians had hundreds of thousands. On paper, this should have been a massacre, but Alexander had something the Persians didn't: revolutionary tactics, unshakable confidence, and a genius for reading the battlefield that bordered on supernatural. The first major confrontation came at the Granicus River. Persian commanders had assembled their forces on the opposite bank, expecting Alexander to wait and plan a careful crossing. Instead, Alexander did what he would do again and again throughout his career. He attacked immediately, personally, leading his cavalry into the river while arrows rained down on them. It was reckless. It was brilliant. He nearly died in the fighting, saved at the last second by one of his commanders, but his audacity shattered the Persian lines. Victory was his, but the real test came the following year at Hydaspes. Darius himself had taken the field with a massive army. Ancient sources claim he had hundreds of thousands of soldiers, though modern historians think it was probably closer to 100,000. Still, Alexander was heavily outnumbered. The smart move would have been to retreat, to wait for better conditions. Alexander charged straight at Darius. Here's where his genius really shows. Alexander studied the terrain, positioned his forces perfectly, and then led his elite companion cavalry in a wedge formation directly at the center of the Persian line, right where Darius was positioned. The sight of Alexander, identifiable by his distinctive armor, personally leading a charge straight at him, broke Darius's nerve. The Persian king fled. His army, seeing their god king running away, collapsed into chaos. Alexander won one of the most decisive victories in military history. After Hydaspes, Darius offered Alexander a deal: half his empire, his daughter's hand in marriage, an enormous ransom for his captured family. One of Alexander's generals, Parmenion, said, "I would accept if I were Alexander." Alexander's response: "So would I if I were Parmenion." He rejected the offer. He didn't want half of Persia. He wanted it all. Alexander then did something unexpected. Instead of chasing Darius, he turned south and spent 2 years conquering the entire eastern Mediterranean coast. Why? Because Persia's strength was its navy, and Alexander, in a stroke of strategic brilliance, realized he could defeat the Persian fleet by conquering all their ports. No ports, no navy. It worked perfectly. He also took Egypt, where he was welcomed as a liberator and declared a pharaoh, a living god. In 331 BCE, Alexander finally marched into the heart of Persia to face Darius one last time at Gaugamela. This time, Darius had prepared. He had chosen flat terrain perfect for his chariots and cavalry. He had scythed chariots designed to tear through infantry formations. His army was enormous, possibly twice the size of Alexander's. He had every advantage. Alexander studied the battlefield the night before and came up with a plan so audacious it's still taught in military academies today. He arranged his forces at an angle, then ordered them to drift to the right during the approach. Darius, seeing this, extended his own left flank to prevent being outflanked. This created a gap in the Persian center. The moment Alexander saw that gap, he formed his cavalry into a massive wedge and charged directly through it, straight at Darius again. Once more, Darius fled, and once more, his army collapsed. The Persian Empire was finished. But Alexander didn't stop. He marched to Babylon, to Susa, to Persepolis, claiming the greatest cities of the ancient world. He adopted Persian customs, wore Persian dress, and married Persian noblewomen. His Macedonian veterans grumbled, but Alexander understood something they didn't. You can't rule an empire by alienating its people. He wanted to create a fusion of Greek and Persian culture, a unified world under his rule. Then he pushed further east, into lands no Greek had ever seen. He crossed into what's now Afghanistan, then into Central Asia, fighting in mountains and deserts. His men were exhausted, homesick, but Alexander kept pushing. He wanted to reach the ends of the earth. In 326 BCE, he crossed into India and faced King Porus at the Hydaspes River. Porus had something Alexander had never fought before: war elephants. These massive creatures could trample infantry and terrified horses. It was one of Alexander's hardest battles, but he won by using the terrain brilliantly, crossing the river during a storm to surprise Porus, then using mobile tactics to avoid the elephants and wear down the Indian forces. But this was as far as his army would go. At the Hydaspes River, his men finally refused to march further. They'd been campaigning for 8 years straight, had fought across thousands of miles, and were desperate to go home. Alexander wept with frustration, but he relented. They turned back. So, what made Alexander truly great? It wasn't just his tactical brilliance, though that was extraordinary. It wasn't just his personal courage, though he was wounded multiple times leading from the front. It was the combination of everything. He understood logistics. He inspired fanatical loyalty in his troops. He adapted to every enemy and every terrain. He combined the Macedonian phalanx with mobile cavalry in ways no one had before. He used speed and surprise as weapons. He led by example, sharing every hardship with his men. Alexander died in Babylon in 323 BCE at just 32 years old. Cause is still debated: fever, poisoning, or complications from his many wounds. His empire immediately fractured, divided among his generals. But his impact on history was permanent. He spread Greek culture across the known world, creating the Hellenistic Age. He founded cities, many called Alexandria, that became centers of learning and culture. His tactics influenced military thinking for thousands of years. Napoleon studied Alexander's campaigns. Julius Caesar wept at a statue of Alexander, feeling he'd accomplished nothing in comparison. Military commanders today still analyze his battles. His ability to inspire, to innovate, to lead from the front, these are timeless principles of leadership. Was he perfect? Absolutely not. He could be ruthless. His ambition sometimes bordered on madness, and he made mistakes. But in terms of pure military genius, of impact on history, of sheer audacity and achievement, Alexander the Great remains in a category of his own. So there you have it, the story of Alexander the Great, a man who conquered the world before most of us finished grad school. What do you think? Was he the greatest general in history, or does someone else deserve that title? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history, smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next video, where we'll be exploring another fascinating historical figure. And if you want to see more content like this, let me know in the comments what historical figure or event you want us to cover next. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay curious.